what was the inspiration and intention of writing your ebook, Awakening Your Hero's Journey?
It evolved. What was happening, I first created a course on choosing to be fit, and that was for midlife women. And that's when I began to see that some of it was lack of self-compassion, and some of it was they just were getting in their own way. They were resisting some of the things they needed to do. So I was watching that. And then I thought, well, I think maybe what I should do is create a course on self-compassion. So I did that, and that turned out to be. And remember, the hero's journey has always been with me since I was in college. So it was just natural to me to think that way. So when I was doing the self-compassion one, first of all, I discovered that I had very little self-compassion.
That's how it works a lot of times, right?
As was true with many of the women in the group. And then that's when I saw it. Oh my gosh, I am teaching people these things when there is the hero's journey that is actually lays out for you the 12 stages of the journey. And it's like a roadmap. And I'm teaching them this stuff and they don't even have the roadmap. So that's when I said, all right, I should teach the hero's journey first. Because once you have the hero's journey and you understand the map, and I'll also talk about the LifeLine, then it makes all of the other things you're trying to learn easier. And that LifeLine thing just came to me a couple of days ago, I think because of where we are in our world right now. I've been calling it a roadmap. And then I was talking to my friend Anne about it, and I said, you know what I just realized? I think it really is more like a lifeline. And she said, well, what does that mean? Well, I grew up in Kodiak, Alaska, on a naval base. And so I saw, the Navy ships and all of that. And what they have on ships is a rope or a line that goes all around the decks. And so when the ship is in a storm and it's going back and forth and water sweeping over, they can hold on to that line and pull themselves around and not get washed away. And that's now how I see the hero's journey. I think it really is a lifeline for us.
Let me ask you some questions about it because that would be interesting for the audience to know. Perhaps we can start with the history of the hero's journey.
Well, it started in the 40s with Joseph Campbell. He was very interested in mythology, and he ended up, as I say, going around the world, looking at all these different cultures, and that's when he found this one myth that kept coming up, so he kind of discovered this monomyth, which really was the hero's journey. And so he's been working with it for a long time. And then one interesting thing I love was when George Lucas was writing Star Wars, he had this huge mess on his hand. I mean, he had all these different characters and all these different plot lines, and it was a big mess. And then one day he remembered, because I took the course, Christopher Vogler had a course on the hero's journey for writers. Lucas had taken it sometime before, and suddenly he kind of thought about that. And he went back and started looking at it. So he ended up using the hero's journey to lay out the movie Star Wars. And that's what, of course, made it work so well. And then it got passed on to other studios. So there are 3 parts to it. I think it's important to understand that. The first part is the call. And we have our ordinary world. That's where we are right now. We're in our ordinary world. And our ordinary world is pretty freaky. It helps us to be aware that we need to have perhaps a better level of awareness of what our ordinary world is. And out of that then comes something called the call to adventure. There's a call for us to change or do something different. We then often will refuse that call or not, and then a meeting with the mentor to help us overcome our reluctance. So that's the call. Then you have the adventure, which has 5 parts, and that I was in the recruiting business for a long time, and I really saw a lot of this where the person would decide that they really wanted this job. Well, the adventure starts with crossing the threshold and committing to change. And so they would arrive there and they would have certain expectations, and then they would feel like, oh, I don't know if I want this or not. And that's often where we need some kind of a guide. And then this is the key. There are tests, allies, and enemies. I taught a course at UCLA Management School on organizational power and politics, which I developed because I saw all these people that I recruit, and they go into the company and they think, oh, this is just wonderful. I'm just going to do everything I wanted to do. And they didn't even think about, well, who are my allies and who are my enemies? And quite frankly, in corporate world, you're going to have them. And then there's the inmost cave and the ordeal, and this is where things get really pretty difficult. And then finally, kind of the reward of beginning to make progress. But here's the key, and this is very important because it's about transformation. The last part is called the return. And the road back, what it is really is a rededication to change. You know, if you think about somebody who, say, has an alcohol problem, they go through a program, they go through all of those things, but then when they go back to their life, they might not make it. So there's that rededication to it. And really then finally going through some kind of transformation where we're actually taking, I guess, who we were and adding in who we are now and coming up with a different way of being. And then we finally master this, and that's when we return from the journey with the elixir. And this is so key because that elixir is what we bring back to share with others.
Yeah, message of wisdom, right? True.
It is. When I was doing my MBA, I was putting together a project, and it was I was using some of the hero's journey, and there's a thing called locus of control. There was a test you could take to show if your locus of control was inner or outer. Did you believe that you had control of your life, or did you believe that it was coming from the outside? Which is often a big problem for people. And that's what I see in the hero's journey. And I saw it again and again in the comments of people who went through it, who would say things like, becoming aware of the stages of the hero's journey has been a revelation and has given me a framework to understand where I am, what I'm stuck on, and how to move forward. And it's things like that, I think, that what I see is if we start seeing ourselves as a hero, well, that begins to move that locus of control inward. And it gives us a great deal more power. And I think a lot of people are afraid of failing, they're afraid of risking. But as you begin to really accept this role as a hero, it changes that in you. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I want to keep teaching this is we just don't realize how heroic we are. I think one of the issues that we're dealing with now is because the world around us is so out of control. And it literally is what I said about the script changing every 15 minutes. So if you think about this and you don't have that lifeline of the hero's journey and you don't have an inner locus of control, it's like you feel like you're just being battered about. We look at all of that and we get angry about it because we can't control it. And I think what we have to understand is that first we have to be able to control ourselves.
I love that message.